Welcome back to the Redeem Podcast. As you can see, I am not alone today. Welcome, Cathy. This is my mom.
Hi, it's my baby girl.
After hearing some comments, feedback, hey, Lauren, your podcast is doing great, but that third episode wasn't that great. To be honest, I knew that. I literally was in the closet of my floor with my laptop, recording on a microphone. I just felt like I needed to keep pushing forward to get these episodes out there because I didn't want to slow down. And then one of my friends, Paige, she actually called me on my way to work. I was like, Lauren, something doesn't sound right on that episode. I panic at work and was like, okay. And so I deleted it. And then I tried to fix it. And it was a hot mess. When I first started, I was using my husband's microphone because he works in the IT world and he already had a microphone. So I didn't have to spend any money. I would steal his microphone, I would do some recordings, and then one day he kept noticing I kept taking his microphone. He Amazoned me a microphone, and not to throw my husband under the bus, but the quality of that microphone was not
terrible.
It was terrible. The volume was like up and down roller coaster. So that's why that episode doesn't sound great. I was using GarageBand. You can't even edit real words. And that's when you stepped in and said, how can I help? She saw how stressed out I was.
She was. I couldn't help her.
Well, you did. Found the software and you were like, I'm paying for it. I decided, let's redo this episode. It's important. The last two episodes, I shared about the time that my father kidnapped me and took me to Jordan. And today is the third part of my story. You should probably go back and start from the beginning because it's an amazing story. This is an important episode. It's the episode about my rescue, hijacking the school bus, seeing me for the first time, escaping into Israel. Like, we can't have a messed up version of that episode.
That's the most harrowing part of the whole deal.
Yep. So what we've decided to do, my mom found some VHS tapes from 1992 with Sheila Walsh.
Yes.
Heart to Heart. It was a show on the 700 Club. Author and a speaker, and she's
a singer. She many Grammys.
She was a singer.
Oh yeah.
My mom found those VHS tapes. Today we're going to put some of those clips in. We're also going to put some cassette tape recordings, actual phone calls when you called my dad and talked to him on the phone, begging him to bring me home.
You're going to make me relive this again?
You don't have to listen to the cassette tapes. I will put that in behind the scenes.
I will probably cry all these years later.
That's
just thinking
okay.
about it.
So that's what you're in for today. My mom and I going back, revisiting our story yet again to share the amazing things that God's done in our life. Redemption, restoration, miracles, and healing. Have you ever found yourself struggling through life's unexpected twists, wondering, this isn't what I planned or hoped for? If so, you're not alone. Life rarely goes as expected, even when we think we've mapped it all out. Psalms 107:2, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Welcome to the Redeem Podcast, a place of encouragement and hope. Through honest conversations and powerful interviews, we'll explore incredible stories of transformation and resilience, even in the face of the impossible. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Mom, many people ask me, how long was I in Jordan before the rescue mission?
From start to finish, about 90 days. During that time, after we met, Rick and I met with the guys and they agreed to take the job, go get you. They told me at that time, this was about 6 weeks after you're gone. That's how much time it took to get to that point. We're trying to put together a plan of what to do now. I had busy work to do. I'm still trying to get a passport, some legal kind of stuff done. And the guys told me, keep in contact, but now with more of a purpose. Try to ask questions that would help determine where he is.
You also talked to family members that were still in the United States, and I have a phone recording of that conversation with another family member.
The family members back here were very sympathetic to my calls.
We're going to take a listen to that.
No. I can't get through. I mean, every time I call, I got his brother's house to answer, but she just said, no, Ollie's in Dallas, and she couldn't speak English. I don't know, she spoke Arabic and said that. And I couldn't.
Are you okay?
I'm all right.
Listen, if there's anything I can do, please don't hesitate. And the only thing I'm able to do right now is just pray for you.
I know.
I keep just saying, please, God, I feel for you.
I know you do.
Oh, she's safe. She's not with a stranger who could harm her, or do you understand?
I know. Let me ask you this. I haven't been to Jordan in 9 years. Has it changed very much, or do they have the army there, where they walk around like they do in Lebanon and Syria?
Oh, God, Cathy, I can't answer you that. I haven't been there in 14 years.
In that recording, we're asking about Lebanon and Syria because during that time there was a war going on, and you were in Dallas watching the news and watching this war occur in the Middle East. Was that correct?
After I'd called so many times, crying and begging, they were getting tired of me. But it was difficult for them. It was difficult for me. But they started saying, well, he's not here. He's in Syria or he's in Lebanon. And I knew it was to get me to stop calling.
It was very broken English because I listened to these tapes.
Oh, that's
and
right.
And it's very broken.
Yeah.
So you're trying to understand what they're saying. They're trying to understand what you're saying. And it's Ali not here, Ali not here.
Exactly, over and over. A few of them could speak, and some of the relatives could speak English. But yeah, it was very difficult. But that was just added stress at a time when the men were hired, they were getting ready to go over there. My job was to try to get as much information out of Ali. And it put me in a tailspin when they said he's in Lebanon or he's in Syria. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Dave at that point had been there a month searching Jerash. Now we're talking about potentially 2 other countries, always some kind of skirmish war, something going on somewhere. That just added fuel to the fire for me. I was beginning really desperate at that point.
On the last episode, I share about the day that you met Dave and Dawn at the hotel in Dallas, and how they agreed to take on this mission of going to Jordan to get me back. And we're about to listen, and if you're on YouTube or a way to watch, we're going to watch your interview with Sheila Walsh from the 700 Club.
Okay.
They agreed to go immediately after Christmas. They would go into Jordan and start trying to find her. They were risking their lives because the Jordanians weren't going to let us walk out of the country with Lauren. A lot of risk had to be taken. At any point, we could have all been arrested and put in prison. Came up with the code that when they located her, they posed as movie makers, filmmakers looking for a site to film a movie in Jordan. And the code was that the sun was shining. And see, that to me was the first real big confirmation because Jesus was shining.
At this point, the men are in Jordan, Dave, JD, and Dawn, and they are trying to figure out a way to find me and an escape route. What were you doing during this time?
Well, I was told to call Jordan every day to try to find out any little bit of information that might help them. So I basically sat by the phone. Remember, that's late 80s and we didn't have cell phones. Okay. So I was pretty much tied to that, tied to the house, tied to the phone, waiting and waiting and waiting.
And praying and hoping that my dad would answer. I actually have another phone call recording. Thank God for Rick Lambert that put that recording device on the phone for us. I have that conversation, and it's going to be hard to listen to, but it's a conversation between you and my dad.
What are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing?
When are you going to bring Lauren home?
No, I'm not going to bring her home.
Why not?
I'm doing this for her own good.
Why?
Because I don't want her to grow up in the United States.
Why not?
The lifestyle.
Why would you walk off and leave your own family?
Well,
is that a good thing? Is that better than the American people? You lying to me and taking Lauren and walking off and leaving your family?
No.
Is that a good religious way to be?
I'm trying to protect, Lord.
Doing it for our own good. You're doing it for your own good. How do you think she's going to feel about you when you've taken her away from me? What have you told her about me?
Nothing.
Well, I know you've told her something. I'm sure she said, well, what does she think? She's there on vacation, or does she think she's going to live there, or what does she think?
Well, she knows she's going to live there, and she's very happy. She goes to school. She learns Arabic and English both. She's very healthy. She's very happy.
Where does she go to school? There's not a school in Jerash, is there?
Well, I have her in a private school.
After that phone conversation, what did you do?
I picked up the phone and called Judy Feeney, that's Don Feeney's wife, back in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and told her that I'd had the conversation, found out she is in Jerash, she is attending a private school, and there couldn't be two at the most, probably only one back in those days. I was super excited. I had something to be hopeful. And she was not in Syria, which was just absolutely driving me crazy. You weren't there. You were in one space. We're close. It just gave me hope.
And even knowing that it was a private school helped them narrow down even more, because the different colored buses, one was for the public schools, one was for the private schools. So this was very important information that you shared with the men. Was it difficult for you to communicate with Judy, with the men? Were you directed to always call Judy first? How did that work?
First of all, Judy came up with a code. The sun is shining. S-O-N is shining, she told me, which immediately I just wanted to start crying, because God's just telling me in that he was in control. I didn't know Judy. I'd never met her, but God put Christians in my path throughout the whole ordeal. The sun is shining was the code word. And the reason we had that was because the men were concerned about communications between Jordan and back to the United States being heard. That's why they needed the code word.
And that code word, the sun is shining, we'll dive into in a little bit more. And you talked with Sheila Walsh about that as well, because that was the code word on the day of the mission, that everything is a go. The sun is shining. You can move forward. Is that correct?
That's right.
I sat by the phone for about a month waiting for that phone call. The sun is shining every day, waiting by the phone, and it never came. Finally, just shortly before their visas were running out, they called me to fly into Cyprus and meet them at the Sun Hall Hotel. I said, okay. I knew everything was still right in order. I knew that my steps were ordered of the Lord. I met them in Cyprus. After they met with me there in Cyprus, they left, flew back into Jordan, and continued trying to find her. They finally called back and said, you're going to have to fly in and help us. I flew in, caught a flight, flew into Amman, terrified that maybe my face would be on a poster at the airport. I don't know what I thought. They greeted me there and drove me up to a little town 20 miles north of Amman, Jerash, and on the way they stopped and got a big scarf for me to put over my head to disguise me a little bit, but I couldn't wear sunglasses, and so I thought because my eyes are light that would maybe give me away. Also, this small town, Ollie's family, there were 24 children. It was a huge extended family. They drove me to this little town, and they just began to zigzag through the streets, and they told me if I recognized anything to let them know. I shook so badly. I shook inside. That was the most frightening of the entire ordeal, because I was so frightened that someone would recognize me. Nothing looked the same. This little town that I'd remember from 12 years before that had dirt streets were now paved. The buildings, they just build one on top of the other, so even the buildings didn't look the same. I just started praying. I said, Lord, you've got to show me where he is. Nothing looks the same. All of a sudden, I would recognize a pharmacy or a drugstore. Things began to come back to memory. And they drove. It's like I sensed that he was over to my left. I didn't even turn and look all the way. I knew he was there, but I just froze inside, and they had gone 2 or 3 blocks up the road before I could tell them, there he is. They made their way back through the street and passed down this little road by where the house was, where I pointed out, and they told me to look the opposite direction. And as I looked the opposite direction, as they passed the house, I saw his car parked on the street. And then that next morning, they came back and they watched the house.
Mom, prior to you guys finally finding my dad's home, this is almost 3 months of this whole story. Dave had already been in Jordan a good month. The men's visas were running out. Time was ticking. You guys found the house. Talk about the day that JD spotted me in the streets of Jerash.
I was still in Cyprus. It was a few days after they left that they were still looking at school buses. They were just looking at buses or kids for the marketplace where kids would play ball and that sort of thing.
And JD was up in the ruins taking pictures, acting like the tourist, and Don was in the streets of Jerash. JD had done everything he knew in his own strength.
Yes.
And he was like, God, this is too much for me. You've got to help me find her.
Started praying. He started praying. And God showed him. He said a bus pulled up and he looked up and he said he knew it was you sitting right by the door because of your eyes.
He said he locked eyes with me.
That's what he said.
And Dawn was just a few feet away from him. And he ran over to Dawn and grabbed Dawn by the shoulders and started shaking Dawn. And Dawn was like, what is going on? Because they're like in disguise and trying to blend in. And here JD, this big military guy, is grabbing Dawn.
Yeah.
And JD's like, I saw her. And Dawn's like, what are you talking about? It's like, I saw Lauren. She was on that bus as the bus starts to drive by. So they had spotted me, but then they couldn't find the house until you came into Jordan. And
Yes.
you began praying and God showed you the home.
Yes, took me right to the front door.
They tried to follow the bus but lost it. Sure enough, when he came back the next morning to watch the house, he saw Lauren get on the school bus, sit in the same spot that he had seen her the day before, and they followed the bus. And the last place that it stopped was up a little country road, up a little mountain path, and they decided that would be the safest place to try to take her off of the school bus. The next couple of days, I had to go to the tourism department and get passed across the Allenby King Hussein Bridge, the only exit out of Jordan into across the Israeli border. They decided that going into Israel would be the best way out. For several days, we mapped out a plan of escape that we would go down the back roads and we would drive it as fast as we could, memorizing all the turns and the holes in the road, the military checkpoints and the roving radar patrols. There were several military checkpoints where they would stop you and ask for your credentials, your passport, all of that sort of thing. And we made friends with those guys. We would give them candy and pastries, and we would ask them where the ruins were, just acted like typical tourists, in hopes that on the morning of the escape that they would remember, oh, that's those tourists again. They would just let us through without stopping us because we would have Lauren then hidden. They also made a fake reservation at the Amman airport for Lauren and I on the morning of the escape to throw them off course so that they would look at the airport. On the morning, we got in the car and we all held hands and we prayed together. It was early in the morning, it was dark and it was cold and it was dreary in January, and we drove up to this town and we had two cars. One guy was to go to the house and make sure she did get on the bus, and so we didn't hijack a bus and no Lauren, she's homesick. But anyway, we made our way up the mountain road, and when we got a message that she was on the bus and to stop it, then we saw the bus come up the little road and make its turn on the country road, and we blocked it, drove behind it, blocked it, jumped out. And I remember standing by that bus, tapping on the window, and Lauren looking right at me. Her little eyes were like saucers. They were so big. She shook it. She looked away and she looked back like, that looks like my mommy, but but I don't know what's going on. I managed to get on the bus, and two of the guys were trying to take the keys out of the ignition, to throw the keys over in the grass so that the guys would be distracted and go and try to find the keys. And in the meantime, I went on behind them and grabbed Lauren and started off the bus. And there was a woman chaperone on the bus that I was unaware of at the time. And as the other guy didn't realize it, but I was trying to get Lauren off, and she jumped on my back to try to stop me. She didn't understand what was going on. She just thought these people are taking this child. She didn't understand I was her mother. But anyway, I had to hit her to make her let go of me. So I could run with Lauren and try to get away. Don't forgive me, I tried not to hurt her little nose. But anyway, I tried to get it off of me, and then I got Lauren in the car and slammed the door, and then they came, and about the time that we were trying to get in the car, I saw a car coming full of people. They were slowing down. I just started praying, oh, please, Lord. One of the guys, one of the commandos, came over and he put his arm around the woman who I'd hit, and she was crying, and he turned her back to the road. And to the passersby, it looked like a domestic disturbance, and the passersby just went on down the mountain. So we jumped in the car, we sped around the mountain, and there on the other side of the mountain, our getaway car was waiting for us in our disguises. We jumped out, jumped into the other car, put our disguises on. I put Lauren down on the floorboard, and she was in shock for about 20 minutes. I could feel the fever rising in her little body. She was just in shock. But it was, I think, moreover, watching her mother fight, because she'd never seen me be violent before. We began to, so after we made the change and put our disguises on, we drove right back past the school bus where, we'd just overtaken it, and the drivers changed, and the other car went right back towards town. And as we passed that bus, fog was so thick and it was so dark that you couldn't even see the hood of the car, much less go 80 miles an hour, which was the plan. It was going to take us an hour to get out of the country at top speed, and I just began to pray as hard as I could pray. And as we just started to descend the mountain, the fog lifted. But as far around as you could see, the sky was pitch black. But way down in the distance, I could see one little patch of land, and it was Israel, and the sun was shining on it. It was my third confirmation. Peace just flooded me, even though I knew we had an hour, we had 2 military checkpoints to get through. I knew that we would make it to our promise.
Mom, take us to the drive. You see the sun is shining, you're driving through the fog, you're on your way to the border. Give us some details about that day.
The first thing I did was change your clothes. I asked the guys if they could slow down, open the window and threw all the clothes out for the children. They came running from every direction. It was the West Bank, where the refugee camp where the Palestinians were. And the road we were on that was heading towards the checkpoint, the border, was lined by tall chain link fence with barbed wire on the top. That was the border just north, where the bridge, King Hussein Allenby Bridge, is the only bridge or exit point most convenient to get out of there. The distance is about an hour from where you were at the school bus to the bridge. The guys had made arrangements the days before to make a deal with the border security officers to allow us to cross the bridge, even though your passport didn't have an entry stamp. They had overcome all of those problems by throwing money at it.
Mom, when I was interviewing Dawn and Dave, they gave me all kinds of insight about things that you and I never knew. Dawn was invited, I think it was actually Dawn and JD, were invited to go and meet with Colonel Digley, one of the Israeli colonels in command.
The IDF,
yes,
Israeli Defense Force.
They told Colonel Digley what they were trying to do. They told him about my story, that they were just going to get me off the bus and just sneak across the border. And Colonel was like, oh, really? You think that's the way it's going to happen? And you can go back and listen to Don's episode because he details it out very well. But the Colonel was like, let me give you a grand tour of the Allenby Bridge, of the border over the Jordan River, and let me show you why it's not so easy to sneak somebody across the border. So he showed them the tank traps, the booby traps, the soldiers, the
landmines,
yes,
sharpshooters in the towers.
Right. And so they already knew, oh my gosh, yeah, this is way harder than we expected. So that was going on. You were saying that they were giving money every time they would go to the border, bribing people. A body was someone that they had an intel that lived in Jordan that knew the language, that was actually a
airline pilot for Alia.
We found out later from Dave, and that's how Dave got out. That's a whole nother story that you can listen to, listening to Dave Chetalier's interview. There's so many intricate pieces that God was interweaving and connecting the right people to get us across that border. So when we drove up, like you just explained, that military force, it was a very secure border, and you had to leave your car there. You couldn't just drive across. So we had to get out of our car, terrified, knowing that our paperwork wasn't legit all the way. We didn't have the entry stamp like you were talking about. And so you're holding me, trying to keep calm and praying as we're getting on that bus. What was that like for you?
I was terrified and looking over my shoulder the whole time. Really couldn't talk. I was just petrified. And I could just love on you and pat you and hold you, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I didn't overdo anything. It's almost like I didn't breathe. We kept sitting there. I thought, are they ever going to come out of that building?
Dawn was frustrated too. So listening to Dawn's interview, Dawn and JD were on the bus with us. They are doing the same thing, like trying to figure out if things go wrong, what are we going to do to get out safely? The bus driver was like eating his lunch. It was like 30, 40 minutes of us sitting on that bus. Dawn was like, hey, I've got a meeting in Israel. We got to go. So finally the bus driver got on the bus.
The most fearful thing is everywhere I looked was barbed wire, gun towers with soldiers with rifles walking around. This bridge was not a typical traffic bridge. It was back then in the 80s, before the Oslo Accords. You couldn't drive your car from Jordan over into Israel and vice versa. You had to have a bridge pass. When the driver finally got on the bus, it was a Jordanian soldier, the bus driver, and another Jordanian soldier that literally walked with his machine gun across his chest to the center of this bridge. As we approached the bridge, there's a guard shack there in the middle of it. That was the dividing line. That was the border crossing between Jordan and Israel. They had the big blue and white Israeli flag with the Star of David in the middle of it was right there. I'm seeing all of these visuals and just knowing we're only a few feet away from being safe. As long as we could get across the border, there was nothing the Jordanians could do to stop us. Look over my shoulder without being obvious. I don't think we spoke at all during that whole time. I don't remember talking to Don and JD at all. I just watched their eyes. They were trying to communicate with their eyes. As we crossed that border, I got to the shack. The Jordanians got off. The Israelis got on. There was a whole changing of the guard, and the bus cranked up, and we crossed over into Israel.
By about the time that our bus rolled over the border, we knew we were safe.
Yes.
And there was a big commotion back where we just left because the Jordanian police just realized that we were on the bus. They had gone looking for us at the airport. They shut down the whole entire airport looking for us. And about that time, that their radios started radioing, go to the Allenby Bridge. They're at the Allenby Bridge. But by the time they realized that, we were in Israel. And there's nothing they could do.
Nothing they could do.
What was it like for you when you stepped off that bus on the Israeli side?
I had a picture in my mind of American soldiers in those old war movies when they got off the airplane, and they touched U.S. soil, or they were free. They just got down on the ground and kissed the ground. And that's how I felt. I wanted to literally step off the bus, fall on the ground, and just kiss the ground of Israel because we were free. And I went over and sat while the guys stood in line. And do you remember what JD said?
Yes. When I interviewed JD, he said that there was a group of women and they came over to him. JD is this big, handsome military man, and they tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, sir, what is going on with that woman and the little girl? Is she okay? Is the little girl okay?" At that point, you let all your emotions out, and we're both crying, hysterical. JD turns with these big tears in his eyes, and he looks at them and he said, "You see that mama and you see that little girl? Her daughter's been gone for 3 months. We just rescued her from Jordan, bringing her to Israel and bringing her back to safety." And those women began jumping up and down, singing worship songs.
Yep.
Came over, put their arms around us, praying over us, saying,
"We have come to the Holy Lands and we have seen a miracle." I'll never forget that.
It's just God.
You couldn't write this ending.
No.
You couldn't write it.
That's why we're sharing the story. That's why I'm in the process of writing a book and doing the podcast. Every part of our story is about God.
It is.
From the very beginning, when my dad took me in Dallas, to the very end of you bringing me home safely And then my journey of healing after that, years of trauma of healing. God even provided us women to meet us in Israel, to pray over us and to worship Him, pointing everything back to Jesus.
Every step of the way.
Mom, thank
right.
you for reliving this. It is not easy. It's not easy to go back to the stuff that hurts. It's not easy to relive trauma 30-something years later. But going back and revisiting reminds us how good God is, and it reminds us what God's brought us through.
It's our testimony.
It's our testimony.
To encourage others.
For the person listening, maybe they haven't had a child kidnapped, but they've gone through hard things. They've gone through loss. They've gone through divorce. They've gone through sickness. They've gone through a child that's wayward child. All the things that happens in this world. What would you say to that person listening?
There's always hope in Jesus. He wants to direct our path. He's a light into our path. He shows us the way if we just go to Him, seek Him, ask Him, Lord, help me. He honors our prayers. He's a Father. He knows when we're hurting. He sees our tears. He sees our struggles. He knows it all. He's always in the middle of every storm. He rolls back the seas. He says that you can say to the mountain, be thou removed, and it shall be gone. We just need the faith, this tiny little mustard seed.
I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing with me, processing through this whole journey of going back and reliving and remembering. Thank you for doing this with me. Well, I cannot finish out this episode without telling you what happened after we got into Israel. Louis Gossett Jr., his movie Iron Eagle 3 was being filmed in Israel. Don and Dave, they knew the producers for the Rambo movies, and you can hear all those details in Dave and JD and Don's interviews that I had recorded. Because they had those connections, they knew what was going on. And Lou went over to Don and put his hand on Don's shoulder and was like, hey man, when are you going to introduce me to this woman and this little girl that you just rescued and brought back from Jordan? And Don looked at it and was like, I'm sorry, I didn't want you to know what was going on, because if things went south, he didn't want Louis Gossett Jr. and their whole production team to get in trouble having any connections with them and our mission. After the fact, they had a big party celebrating our rescue that evening in Israel. I don't have very many memories of that, but I do remember Louis Gossett Jr. giving me a rose and giving me a big hug. I still have that rose somewhere in a book. And just that special moment. I don't think, of course, at 7 and all the trauma I had just gone through, I didn't realize the magnitude, what had just happened. We spent a few more days in Israel. I remember playing at the beach. I have photos of those days. When we flew home, it was January. We flew home, and my Aunt Joyce, she wasn't really my aunt, but she was like an aunt, another mother to me. She left every Christmas tree, her whole house decorated, waiting for the day that I would return. When we got to the Dallas airport, the very first person I saw coming down, running the wrong direction as all the people are coming off the airplane, was Miranda Lambert. She was probably 4 or 5 at the time. You could see her blonde hair running towards me through the crowd and gave me the biggest hug. And then I saw Rick and Beverly and my Aunt Joyce all there at the airport waiting for us to greet us. Those are some moments I'll never forget. And luckily I have photos of those moments, which are just precious memories for me. And we got to go to my aunt's house, and I opened Christmas presents, and we celebrated Christmas in mid to late January that year. I will forever be grateful for the village of people that God put in my life and my mom's life to walk us through those hard things. The Bible has so many stories about how God puts a village of people together to pour into you, to support you, to encourage you, because there's times in our life, I believe if you live long enough, you're going to know what it's like to go through hard things. But God will provide. When you're in those places of desperation, you get fearful and depressed and sad and lonely, and you want to just be held up in your bedroom or your house and not come out. I highly encourage you, reach out to people. Reach out to those people that you feel comfortable and safe with and let them know what's going on. Let them lift you up. Let them be your Aaron and Hur, lifting your arms up and praying over you and encouraging you, because God did not mean for us to walk this life alone. I love the Bible verse, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another, because it's so true. There's so much truth to that Bible verse. Psalms 133, 1-3. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robe. It's like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountain of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessings, life forevermore. I'd like to pause and pray over you, the one listening today. Father, I thank you. I thank you for the goodness, the redemption, the miracles, the faith, like my mom said, of a mustard seed. The men and the women that you put in my life so many years ago and still today to walk through things that occur even now. And God, you see the listener and you see what they need, every detail of their story. Father, the people you've already put in their lives to be that support, to be that community. God, would you open those opportunities to build that community around them, that they would feel that love and that support, that they would not sit in depression or anger or anxiety, that the devil would not have a strong hold on them of fear, but God, that all pride would go. And Father, that there would be a spirit of humility to reach out and to say, I need help. I need someone to listen to me, to encourage me, to give me guidance. And God, would you pour wisdom into their lives today? I thank you, God, that you are the God of miracles, that you see us, that you love us, that you bring a hope, and that you bring redemption. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for listening. Quick reminder, if you would like to subscribe to the newsletter, the Redeemed newsletter, those go out about twice a month. I will put the link in the show notes so you can follow many different episodes and the process of me writing a book. I have an editor that I'm working with, and that's a whole new journey for me. I'm learning all kinds of things through this. And so I would ask for prayer over that as I continue this process of writing a book, to put my story out there, to point people to Jesus. I would love your prayer and support. Super excited to announce that I am going to be partnering with his collection apparel. One of the hats that we recently created is the Redeemed hat. I also have a sweatshirt. I highly recommend for you to go to hiscollectionapparel.com and check out their website. You can purchase off the website. They also have a Facebook and Instagram, His Co Apparel. Easy to find. Go there and learn a little bit more about their story, their mission, and how they got started. I hope that you know that you are redeemed and you are loved and that God sees you. And I can't wait to connect with you again on Facebook, Instagram, Lauren Burns Redeemed. Have a fantastic day.